Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's talk about rebranding. Why is it important to know about rebranding? Well, if you're a creative professional, knowing about when it's the right time to rebrand is important because when you're working with clients and they're thinking about doing something with their brand, knowing what the triggers are for when it's the right time to rebrand is something that you can pass on to your clients. And if you're a business owner, knowing when to rebrand and when not to rebrand is also important to know. The number one rule about rebranding that you have to remember is that consistency is everything in branding. So you want to rebrand as little as possible. You really want to have a lot of restraint when it comes to changing your brand. You don't want to change your brand all the time. You don't want to change it just because you're bored. You don't want to take making any changes to your brand lightly because when you change your brand, you are starting down the road of offering up some sort of customer confusion. If you were in packaging or if you were doing a physical product that you were selling in retail, any kind of change to your brand affects the recognition of your package on the shelf as the customer is coming down the shelf looking for what they want to buy. That you build up a level of brand equity, visual equity, verbal equity in your brand over time. I always talk about the 3 R's, so being recognized, remembered, and revered. And the consistency in branding really addresses those first 2 R's, being able to be recognized and being able to be remembered. If you can't be recognized or if you're changing things up in your brand all the time, it's very difficult for people to remember exactly what it is you look like and find you very easily when they come across your brand in the brandosphere. And so you want to make sure that you're maintaining that level of capital, of brand equity that's built up over time in your brand as much as possible. But there are times when it is time to do a little rebranding. And there are rebrands, like wholesale rebrands, and there's also brand refreshes. And I'm going to talk about mostly rebranding. Now, a refresh could be just a tweak to your logo or a tweak to your color palette and everything else stays the same, just because you have to address something to either make it better or to make it clearer or to address a change in your business. But let's talk about what are the triggers and when it's time to really rebrand. There are basically 4 major triggers that signal when it's time to do a major rebrand. Number 1 is when your business objectives have changed. Do you have a brand new customer target? Is your product focus changed? So for an example, Under Armour started off as just an underwear company, but they have expanded to be much more like Nike, and they're doing all sorts of athletic apparel. So they probably should undergo some sort of major rebrand in order to address this larger product scope that their brand is undertaking. And in fact, their name is somewhat confining. When they started off, I don't think that they thought about how massive they would get. And so Under Armour really refers to underwear or undergarments, and that's not what they do anymore. So I'm not saying they should rename themselves, but when you're naming your business, you have to be very cognizant of whether or not you're painting yourself into a corner. Another example of this is I worked for a small company when I was just out of undergraduate school. It was called Nothing But Posters. And they pretty much sold posters. And then they got into framing in a very big way. And then they started to sell fine art. And then they started to sell home accessories. And so their name, Nothing But Posters, on their sign out in front of their business was incredibly confining. And they went about a rename and a major rebrand because their business objective had totally changed. The second trigger is when your brand doesn't reflect your business anymore. For example, Apple computers, they started off doing just desktop computers, and then they became all about the iPod, and then they became all about the iPhone, and now they're doing AirPods, they're doing tablets, they're doing all sorts of products and services. And I'm not saying Apple should change their name, but they have undergone major brand refreshes over time. And that kind of a relook at their business was triggered by the fact that their brand identity didn't reflect their business that much anymore. So if you have changed or that brand identity, that brand look and feel doesn't reflect you anymore or doesn't reflect your business anymore, it's time for a rebrand. The third trigger is when styles have changed or the times have changed so dramatically that your brand looks dated. Now, if you look at Coca-Cola or if you look at Pepsi, those brands have been around more than 100 years. And styles have changed incredibly dramatically over that period of time. And therefore, those brands have gone through major redesigns over time in order to address the style of the times. So in fashion, it's very much like fashion in the fact that styles change very frequently. Design changes, fonts go out of style, illustration styles, if you have an illustration in your logo, those sorts of things change really dramatically. Color palettes go out of style, logo treatments go out of style. So if you're looking at your brand and you're finding that it's looking incredibly dated, you might want to consider a rebrand. Now, the fourth trigger is a lot more emotional. It's when you just don't feel good about your brand anymore. You have to feel good about your brand because it is where you will draw your energy and where you'll draw your motivation. And if for any reason you don't feel that brand really gives the energy that you need to drive your business forward, then you should really think about a rebrand. And you don't want to change just because you're bored. You don't want to just change for change's sake. But you do want to be true to yourself and true to your emotions and true to that inner energy that you have in your brand. And if you don't feel that connection anymore, it's time for a rebrand. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video on when it's time to rebrand. And if you did, please hit subscribe below so you can see my videos when they come out. And make sure to hit that notifications bell because I'm starting to do more live videos. And if you don't have notifications turned on, you're not going to know when I go live. Or you can go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. I'll also make announcements to my email list about when I'm going to go live in advance. And also those people will get access to more exclusive content. So go sign up for that. The link's in the description. And with that, thanks again for watching. Bye for now.